Welcome back to another episode of the Bleed Lows podcast, a live edition of the show. And we are here on day two of the official day of spring training. The 2024 season is done, the off season is concluded, and the 2025 season is here. And we have a really good episode today for everybody that's subscribed and here watching today. Obviously, you see in the middle here on your screen a guy that we've had on a couple times before as well. If you don't know him in Dodger land by now, I don't know where you've been. You must have been hiding under a rock, but obviously that is Clint Pasillas, host of All Dodgers LA, Dodgers territory with Alana Rizzo on the Foul Territory Network. But Clint, how are you doing, my friend?
Hey, we were talking just before going live here, man. Spring training is here, so I feel great. I am ready for baseball. I am ready to see this team run out there because how do you go and win a World Series and then put together the offseason that we saw? This is it's a master class, and I cannot wait to see all these dudes competing.
Yeah, it's an
Amen to
exciting
that.
time, and we're going to get into it. And obviously, joining me, as always, is my co host, Jacob Brownson. But before we get into all that, obviously, we got to plug the sponsor, Bet Online, in here. So, Bet Online is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in the 2025 year. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from the NBA, college basketball, to the NHL, the UFC, BetOnline continues to be your number one source for betting online. From every three-pointer to hat trick, BetOnline has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. BetOnline, the game starts here. And let's get straight into it. Obviously, Clint, we saw what the Dodgers did this offseason. Are you just off the top of your head, are you surprised with how aggressive they were after winning a World Series?
I mean, yes and no. You would think, understanding how much talent this team did still have, and when we saw a number of players, pitchers make their MLB debuts last year, had some arms coming back. You, I think they could have not made moves, and we would have felt very good about this team. Outside of yeah, you got to bring back Teoscar Hernandez, you got to bring back Kike Hernandez, bring the boys back that were a big part of it. And I think they would have been fine, but on the flip side, and this was something I sort of mentioned on my show recently, it's you get that taste. I think they got that taste, particularly Andrew Friedman got that taste of that parade and thought back to all of the pain to getting there, losing all of those pitchers and all of the injuries and all the things that could have very easily derailed this team last year. He's like, I don't want to go through that again. And we're going to go out there. And he told us on Dodgers territory, the great Andrew Friedman joining myself and co-host Alana Rizzo this week, saying this was one of those rare off seasons where every A plan worked out for them. And for us, thank God it did, because again, this is an incredible team on paper. Now they got to go prove it.
Jacob, going around the horn here with this question, it's kind of something we talked about all winter, where it seemed like every single move that they made was just like, wow, they got this guy, especially towards the tail end, especially when they officially assigned Scott and then Kirby Yates on top of that. That's where I was like, all right, now we're starting to go a little overboard. Yeah. Maybe I'm seeing why a lot of the fans around the league are a little ticked off of what's going on right now. I'm over here celebrating, but yeah, I mean, the Dodgers took advantage of what the market was. They have the money, they have the popularity, they built the culture. But even with all that said, was it surprising to you going into this offseason to say, hey, only a couple guys, well, let's bring them back, like Clint mentioned, but it seemed like they brought in three quarters or a fourth of the market.
Yeah, I'm gonna piggyback off of Clint's yes and no. There was obviously some spots on the roster they needed to fill coming into the offseason. Everyone knew they needed at least one pitcher, probably a couple. They needed a left-handed outfielder, but I think they took what they needed and went and got an excess and just blew everyone's expectations out of the water. Like you said, Tanner Scott, Kirby Yates, they didn't need those guys. They have guys that could contribute that are already on the roster, maybe down at AAA, like a Henriquez or even some of those other arms. But they went out and acquired the best talent they could possibly get. And they showed to the fans why they're going to continue to invest money and continue to win.
Yeah, and then obviously, if anyone's been watching this channel, other channels like Clint, there's a bunch of Dodger podcasts, bunch of Dodger news sources out there. You're clearly up to date of the moves that they have made. So, looking back recently of what they've done this week, especially one that was already made official. And Clint, I know this is a guy that you've been heavily advocating for. I've been advocating for. I'm pretty sure all of Los Angeles and Dodger fans across the country and the world have been asking for them to come back. It's the other Hernandez and Kike Hernandez. Dodgers finally got it done. 1 year, $6.5 million deal. What are your overall thoughts on him returning? Obviously, he spoke with the media today, had some comments about, wanting to finally get to, experience the ring ceremony, returning with the, a clubhouse that, that really gelled together in the second half. I know you love the move, but what else can you say about, another reunion with Kike Hernandez on this one?
Yeah, it's weird. And for somebody like me, you mentioned so many Dodgers podcasts, and I've been doing this now for a very, very long time. What feels like too long. I don't know why I'm still doing it, but the people seem to have fun doing it. But I think back to the very early throes of me doing Dodgers YouTube stuff, and I was not always the biggest Kike Hernandez fan. Him and I had maybe a little bit of beef in the past. I just I thought I thought maybe there's too much hype. I wanted to see not that unwarranted hype or unwarranted love. I wanted to see more production out of the kid. I think this whole and I'm getting away from the question here, but I think the whole path that Kike Hernandez had to take, struggles, successes, Boston, injuries, failures, re-signing with the team late last spring, going the entirety of this offseason, kind of knowing he's going back there, culminating really into that postseason run last year where we heard Andrew Friedman tell us this week, yeah, I love the leadership. I love the growth. He had to go through all of that to get to that level of a player he is now, where he's kind of another one of those guys you could plug into that clubhouse that fills the role that Justin Turner used to have. Another one of those field generals that Dave Roberts needs to have while he's doing his rounds. He could send out dudes to kind of go, crack some heads if he needs to. You need to have that guy while also keeping it light and fun. And even if there's not an obvious natural fit on the roster as a player, to have that guy back in this clubhouse, it was one of those things, like you said, seeing that team gel, just looking at the videos, out of CamelBack Ranch yesterday, all the players messing around with Hae-Sung Kim, really it looked like the boys were happy to get together, and you can't have a party without your boy Kike Hernandez there. So that was a whole bunch of, I guess a lot of people needed to watch me for a long time to understand the story there, but still, short version, good. Kike Hernandez back, good.
I mean, even kind of continuing off of that, like, I understand when some Dodger fans or even people in the media that say, well, is it a little bit of redundancy to, to continuously bring back Kike Hernandez? Because you kind of understand what he brings to the table. His regular season, despite having a really good second half once he started getting glasses put on, his career number, 713 OPS, 92 OPS plus. I mean, league average to below league average in terms of the offensive production, but the versatility's there. The leadership in the clubhouse is obviously there now. The Dodgers seem to bring him back for, when it matters, and that's the postseason, which I don't even think we need to go over his postseason, legacy right now, whether it's with the Dodgers or Boston during the 2021 postseason. Clearly, the Dodgers know what they're getting. Before I go pivot to Jacob on this one, do you think the Dodgers, we see the guys they have in the minor league system. A lot of these guys are knocking on the door. They won a shot. Do you think it's unfair to those players to continue having a roster spot for a veteran Rojas, Kike Hernandez, Chris Taylor, like all these guys? Or do you trust what the Dodgers are doing, where it seems like recently they value veteran leadership, and then come October, all of that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a blend of both. You would love to see some of these guys, top prospects, some other names, guys that very much would have got opportunities with other ball clubs, like Ryan Avens or Drew Avens, sorry, Andre Lipsius last year. Some dudes, Cody Hosey, these guys would get opportunities elsewhere with the Dodgers, they are blocked, and then they're blocked by other players like Kike, like Chris Taylor, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, you'd really like to see them maybe not lean so heavy on the on the veteran side, on that sort of the leadership end. And we saw a little bit with Andy Pajes, but at the end of the day, I guess if this blend works to win championships, you can't really question what they're doing so much. Yeah, you'd like to see the kids get some chances, but if it doesn't work, or if it's just not in the cards right now in the Shohei Ohtani era, sorry, boys, you're going to be traded, at some point, hopefully sooner than Michael Busch or something like that.
Yeah, and that's kind of my rule of thumb and kind of philosophy, especially with given the situation the Dodgers are in right now. They have multiple Hall of Fame players on their roster. They kind of have to go all in. And I take major league proven talent over the minor league prospect potential because we've seen it, not to disregard, a Michael Busch or Miguel Vargas. And I mean, even James Outman to an extent, he's a friend of the show. He went through his struggles after a really good rookie season. So I think the Dodgers see that. And if they're looking at role players, not for say like everyday starters, then they're just going to go with that veteran option, especially someone that they're already familiar with in Kike. I mean, they traded for him, twice, from Miami and then from, Boston, and then they re-signed him in back-to-back off season. I mean, even if we remember last year, they had to decide between, all right, are we going with Manuel Margot or are we going with Kike Hernandez? And they ended up going with Hernandez. So I think in the end, at the end of the season, especially if things go their way, I believe Hernandez is going to be impactful on that. But Jacob, let's get your thoughts on this. Obviously fan favorite Kike Hernandez. I mean, are you expecting him to bring more to the table? I mean, I mentioned his second half numbers in the regular season. They were pretty good, and we all know what he did in October.
Yeah, first of all, I just want to say happy for Clint that Kike came back. Feels like every time I turned on Dodgers territory, you were making that pitch. So that's awesome. I think with Kike, you're kind of getting what you expect. I think there is some ceiling, a higher ceiling than maybe where he's been kind of the last couple of years. But he's going to give you versatility. He's going to be a consistent glove all over the field. The bat could be a little better. But even if he's giving you those other things and he's putting up a 680, 700 OPS, you'll take that. You don't need 13 All-Stars in that room. With the minor leaguers, I think for those guys, it's really tough. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and the role of the front office is to put the 13 best players that they can put on the major league roster to go and try to make a title run. There's some guys that are going to get chances, and there's some guys that are going to get traded. And that's just kind of what comes with playing for a winning organization like the Dodgers. But whatever they're doing, it's working. I trust it. And I love watching the Dodgers. So just keep doing whatever they're doing.
Yeah, it's working, right? It's working.
Yeah. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. And who's to say, like Jacob said, these guys are going to get their opportunity to shine. We all saw what happened last season. The Dodgers got bit by the injury bug for some unseen fortunate events. Mookie Betts breaking his wrist. I don't think anyone had that on their bingo card. Ohtani in October getting dinged up a bit. Miguel Rojas is coming off of a hernia surgery. He's also entering his mid to late 30s. How is he going to look? The Dodgers aren't a 26-man roster organization. They are a 40-man roster organization. They will utilize pretty much everybody, especially on the pitching side, maybe even on the position player side this season as well as they look. I think the big thing that they've been trying to push, especially this early at camp, is that they want to give players primarily like Ohtani time to breathe, time to relax, time to get off their feet, because they realize, even if they have a couple guys that have down years, this team has enough depth just to win like 95 games with playing their B lineup. I mean, that's just how talented they are right now. And we're fortunate to be able to watch this. Moving on, kind of going off of what Hernandez brings to the table. I kind of wrote about it on DodgersBeat.com. A lot of other people are starting to look at it. What does this mean for a couple players on the roster right now? Obviously, the one that people are looking at right now is Chris Taylor. Andy Pajas is another name. And then newly signed Korean utility infielder Hae-sung Kim. Seems like those three guys are battling it out for either the final 26-man or the last two roster spots. So, Clint, just looking at it straight away, obviously a lot of fans are going to have the clear answer here, and we know who it is. We've talked about it, time and time again. But who is the odd man out here? And is it an easy decision to make if you're Dave Roberts or Andrew Friedman?
No, this is definitely going to be one of those spring trainings of very, very, very difficult conversations. You mentioned kind of tongue in cheek with Chris Taylor. He's, if you're looking at just a number standpoint, a name on a 40-man roster, it's obvious there. He had a terrible year. He's been rough since signing that 4-year deal, entering the final year of that deal. However, he's also like the second longest tenured position player on this team. He is a very important, maybe not as vocal, maybe doesn't have the same dance moves Kike has, but he's a very important member of that clubhouse. And I think it would devastate that team, that cohesion, that unit, to see him cut, as where you have somebody like Hae-sung Kim. And my opinion is, and I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts on this, Cody. My opinion is Hae-sung Kim can play his way off of this roster. I think he's firmly in the mix right now. He's somebody can play his way off this roster with a poor spring training. But in terms of odd man out, I think it sucks, but the obvious answer is sort of Andy Pajes, just because he's got options. He's young, had a good season last year, not great season last year. He has some holes in his games that can be fixed, and he's not going to play every single day with the big league club. So you can very easily say, hey, sorry, we want you to get playing time every day at AAA. So I think Pajes will be the odd man out. But I'm curious your thoughts about Kim and what he could do or not do this spring.
I'll touch on Kim.
Go for it.
I'm very high on this guy. At the very least, you're getting a terrific glove. I think his spot's safe. I think the conversation, I do agree that he can play out of a spot potentially if he doesn't look good in spring training.
Yeah, if he's like straight up lost and just whiffing, that would be tough. I don't see that. I mean, this is Dodgers front office. They know what the hell they're going out and signing, But anyways, go ahead.
Yeah, he's another guy you kind of know what you're getting. He's a Gold Glove caliber defender. I'm willing to say that before he's ever played in Major League Baseball. I watched a lot of him the last couple months, tried to find what I could. This guy is a terrific defender. The bat to ball skills are there. Now we'll see with a much better pitching in the U.S. and Major League Baseball how that adjustment is made. I think his spot is safe. I like the way you put it, that if you're just looking at names on a roster, Chris Taylor's the obvious decision, but that's just not, unfortunately, how it works. They have to factor in the money, what he means to the city and all the work he does and his clubhouse presence. All of that has to be considered. If you're asking me, it's still Chris Taylor. I'm so high on Andy Pajes. I think even in the playoffs last year, you started to see him kind of pick it up again. He was really good, then not great, then pretty good again, and then I really liked what I saw from him in the playoffs. I think the Dodgers are really high on him. They've been high on him for years. I do think it could come down to performance in spring training, the swings they're taking. But if a decision's made today, it very well may be Andy Pajes getting optioned.
Yeah, I definitely agree with, Clint here on saying I can see Kim playing himself off the roster. If he looks lost, if he's behind on pitches, this is major league pitching. So obviously it's a massive step up to what he was seeing in the KBO. I mean, the KBO, if you're looking at international, it's like KBO, Japan, and then you're getting to the MLB pitching. And if you even look at his career, stats, like a 766 OPS career, did max out at 841 last season. So did show some power numbers there. But if you look at a lot of his highlights reel, and this is not, maybe I'm not seeing the right videos here, but it's a lot of slap hits, a lot of weak contact singles. That's kind of part of his game. He defensive first speed kind of guy. And that's, I think, what Jacob was alluding to, is that's what the Dodgers plan on doing. I mean, Gomes even said as much. They don't want him to play just second base. They want to get him to play second, short, third. Hell, he even played a corner outfield spot in Korea. So maybe the Dodgers see him doing that there.
And having somebody like that too. You don't need to have everybody be a bopper. I love having somebody that's bat the ball, move the ball forward, even if they're not hitting 270 or 300, just somebody who keeps the line moving and does, plays their role. I love having that on this team just to kind of give a different look to the lineup. That's my thoughts. I'm kind of curious too. Like, obviously he would be taking the spot of Gavin Lux.
Yeah.
Who would you take, Cody, in that situation? Do you still take Lux, or are you more excited to see what Kim could bring?
I think I'm a big Lux fan, but I was kind of excited to see a different chapter. I feel like maybe Lux for himself. I'm seeing talks that he's probably going to get some chance to be their full-time shortstop in Cincinnati. So I think he needed to change his scenery. I think the Dodgers kind of saw that they needed to change the scenery with the position. I mean, they still don't really have their middle infield figured out since Trey Turner, Corey Seager walked, but they've made it work. I mean, Mookie Betts, that's the other storyline that everybody's going to be talking about this spring. But I think I'm high on Kim. I just want to see what the bat looks like, just because I know the defense is going to translate. That's the first thing. And then the speed is obviously there. And then kind of what you're saying, Clint, like, this is the 9-hole hitter we're talking about for the Dodgers. If he can just get on base and transition it back to the top 3, MVPs in Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman, then that's all you're really going to ask for him. I don't really care about his bottom line. If he's batting close to the Mendoza line, 200, 250, if he's playing good defense, walking, not striking out, not struggling mightily up the plate, I think his roster spot is going to be guaranteed. The curveball with it is that when he signed that contract, he didn't have a clause in there like a lot of international players have, to where they can't get optioned, especially after they're posted. So that's where you're saying, all right, well, if he's really bad, the Dodgers do have the opportunity to option him down to keep other guys on the roster. In terms of Andy Paz, guy has options. So that's, in my opinion, I think it's going to be him to bite the bullet. I think the Dodgers are going to want to give him full-time playing time and get his at-bats against both righties and lefties, because if you look at his advanced numbers, dude smashes lefties. I mean, he hit 2 home runs in that NLCS game last year. One of them, or both of them, were off a lefty. Had a 157 WRC plus against left-handers last year. Clearly, he's got some power there. I would say out of all these 3 guys that we mentioned, he's got the most upside. He's got the power. His defensive metrics, while with the eye test they look shaky in center, was actually a pretty above average fielder out there. He's got one of the best arms in baseball.
Yeah. And he got better as the year went on.
Yes.
As he got more comfortable in center, he got a lot better.
Yeah, and I think the Dodgers see that, and I think they still want him to go through his development to say, hey, right, how can we limit strikeouts? How can we, start hitting against, more equal splits, especially against right-handers? And that's how you can get an everyday role, whether it's at the end of this season or in 2026. And then with Chris Taylor, I mean, I get it. You look at the stats, not really good since he signed that. He re-signed that 4-year deal with LA, 222, 310, 374 slash, OPS under 700, WRC plus under 100. I mean, he's literally been a below league average player. He's dealt with some injuries. Mechanics could be a thing. That's the big thing he's been talking about, especially coming into this year. But you got to look at it of what the Dodgers are selling, not just to their fans, but to the other players in the market, or that are going to be in the open market. They're trying to be that organization that is player friendly. Chris Taylor is very close to 10 years service time, and that is a big deal, especially within the MLB player community. So I don't think they're going to just DFA him or get rid of him. If they can find a trade partner, awesome. But if not, they may just ride it out for the whole season and see what happens. Maybe leave him off October. At this point, I mean, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. It's just these guys are playing who's going to be on that 26-man roster come October.
I would say 2 things. Let's send Chris Taylor to Kike Hernandez's optometrist just to see if glasses help for fun. And I mean, how funny is it that we're like complaining or having this much dialogue about literally like the 13th position player on the roster? It's a great time to be a Dodger fan, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. Any closing other comments on this, Jacob, before we transition on?
Not really. No, it's tough because everyone kind of has a case. If you're just looking at the numbers, there are definitely some stronger cases than others, but it's tough. This is the business. There's tough decisions. I don't think anything's finalized right now. I think we'll know in about a month.
Alrighty, so before we move on to the next topic, we got another ad plug for you guys. This time it's with Underdog Fantasy. Obviously, if you guys haven't heard of this app by now, it's actually pretty convenient. I've used it a couple times. I know a lot of my friends use it, especially with their sports. It's not necessarily gambling because it's fantasy, so you can. It's very easy. You pick players. They have a line, especially with a sport like baseball, where you have games every day. You have a lot of stats. Home runs, hits, runs. You either bet under the line or you bet over the line, and it's very convenient, easy to use. You download the app. And then you're pretty much right there. They throw you right in after you make an account.
It's a blast.
I know, Jacob, you've used it once or twice. You've made a good bit of money from it as well. I mean, speak of your experience with the app.
Super Bowl last year, that was the most on edge I think I've ever been in my life, besides maybe a couple times at my local casino. But I was very fortunate with like quite a few parlays on Super Bowl night last night. So I enjoy it. It for me personally, it makes games that I wouldn't watch previously a little more entertaining.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, for anyone that hasn't used it, is a pick'em style type of gameplay where you pick player, team, and then you bet against the line. If you use promo code LA Dodgers and our referral link, that will be linked below in our description on the YouTube side of things, our social medias as well. The promo code gives you new users a free pick and up to $1,000 in bonus cash. So be sure to use that promo code and the referral link. It helps us out here on the channel to grow this and grow the content that we're getting. And like I said, I mean, if you're just getting into it, or you kind of are someone that likes the stats and watches the games as in-depth as we all do, it can be a little bit of a side fun thing that you guys can all do. So be sure to use that referral link. Back to the episode here. Pacoda, projections, Fangraphs, all that. The Dodgers, clearly, after everything that they did this offseason, they blew those projections out of the roof. I think Fangraphs had them at around 98, 99 wins. Pacoda is the bread and butter, in my opinion. That's the one I look at every single season. And they were actually projected for an astronomical amount of 104 wins, Clint. More than any other team in baseball, more than what they had projected last year. Typically, most teams in this model aren't projected to win 100 or more. The Dodgers, I think, in this run of, this past decade, have been projected to win over 100 games 5 times. This is the 5th time. Clearly, there's a lot of buildup to the regular season, and we've seen the Dodgers win multiple divisions. We've seen them win over 100 games. We've had Miguel Rojas on the Chris Rose rotation a couple weeks back state that, it's kind of a personal or a team goal for them to, set those win records or achieve those goals. In your opinion, is that something that the Dodgers should necessarily be focused on, or should they just be like, all right, win the division, get a postseason spot, just get in, and then we'll see what happens? Or are you saying, hey, Mariners, we want that 117th win. Yankees, we want to be that team that, wins over 111 games and wins the World Series, or are you going to be the other side of this?
I'm going to take what I assume the Dodgers route would be, and it's just you win that day's game. You show up there to win that day's game, and by the time all is said and done, they're going to be north of 100 wins. They'll probably be close to – I got them at 109 wins. I don't think they break the record just because the NL West is very good. It's a very good division. Teams are generally good in the National League and got better this offseason. We're seeing right now, apparently the Red Sox just got better. Apparently they signed Alex Bregman. If he got that $200 million he was looking for, I'm sorry, Red Sox. But ball don't lie. And this team goes out there and balls each day, which is a weird phrase to say, but they go out there, they play each day to win that day's game. So I feel pretty good about them at least matching or coming close to matching that Pacoda number.
Jacob, I mean, obviously we know the projections. We've seen them. We've seen people talk about them. Clearly the Dodgers, they have a target on their back from what they've done this offseason, but they also just have lofty expectations on them. Not only do they have to excel during the regular season, but they're pretty much World Series or bust mode the next couple years, especially what they've done this season or this off season. Do you expect them to exceed that 100-win total? I mean, I feel like that's kind of a given if everything goes right, but are you one of those fans that says, all right, I want them to, best record in baseball, make a statement, go for the history books? Or are you kind of just like what they did this season? They ended up with the best record in baseball last year. I don't know how, especially after some of the stretches that they had in mid-July, closer to the All-Star break, because they still finished with 98 wins. Their first year not winning over 100 games since, I believe, 2018 in a full season. So, but what are your thoughts on everything here, Jacob?
I mean, I would be absolutely surprised if they didn't get to 100. As far as like the mentality in the clubhouse, it's exactly what Clint said. It's things. This is what they've talked about the last couple of days. Their goal is to just take things one game at a time, get those little victories throughout the season. That was the message Mookie Betts brought in when he was traded to the Dodgers, is we need to do better at celebrating the little things and focusing one day at a time. So that's, at the end of the day, that's what they're looking towards. I know Rojas said their goal is 117. Obviously, that would be awesome. I had a conversation about this in a space the other day where people were talking about if they wanted that, if they would be willing for the Dodgers to go playoff mode in September to accomplish that. I think it's good as far as giving you something to play for and maybe giving value to those games in September, like this year when they had to really play against the Padres because the division wasn't locked up. But the Dodgers organization is not an organization that's going to put winning a win total above players' health or just even like throwing people off rest for the playoffs. The playoffs matter. Ask Andrew Friedman if he cares about 117. You'll know what his answer is. Like, it would be awesome, but that's not what they're worried about. That's something that would be awesome to accomplish. But at the end of the day, it's about getting to the playoffs healthy with a good roster in a good spot. And that's where the focus is going to be before anything else.
Yeah, I mean, if you ask me personally, I don't care. I could not give any less, about the amount of wins they've got. I've been, crushed as a Dodger fan recently, especially seeing the amount of games that they've won in those 100-win seasons, and then to still come up short.
Point.
They haven't won the World Series whenever they won over 100 games. Let's just be clear with that.
Really good
point. A lot of those years, they lost in the first round. 2019, they lose to the Nationals. 2022, they lose to the Padres. 21, they lose to the Braves, who had like 87 wins, 89 wins, something along that number. It doesn't matter. And I think the Dodgers know that. I think at the end of the day, they want to be healthy. And I think this season they brought in players that are hungry. Blake Snell, Tanner Scott, all these guys that have been in the moment, have been in the postseason, have come up just short. That's going to help them. They also have players that are just trying to, pad on to their legacy. I mean, Ohtani, he mentioned at the parade, he wants to fill his hand up with rings. Ohtani, that guy's just a competitor. He's going to win. He's going to want to win each year. And the Dodgers know the only way they can do that is if they're healthy. Obviously, they kind of went against the grain in that regard last year, with the rotation health that they had. Only 3 viable starting pitchers. A lot of the people that they had, signed or brought in for their rotation just weren't there. Gavin Stone, Tyler Glasnow, Clayton Kershaw, among others. That's not going to happen again. I mean, it's really rare that it even did happen. That's why so many beat writers were picking against the Dodgers, because they just weren't buying into the magic. The Dodgers just had a little bit of funk last year. I don't think that's going to happen again. Andrew Freeman doesn't think that's going to happen again. And I think that's why you saw them go hyper-focused this offseason.
Yeah, I mean, they filled, you mentioned earlier in the stream, like there was a clear need for a pitcher. I think Jacob, you mentioned they needed a pitcher, probably 2 pitchers. They went out and got that. They got the best that they could get, you could argue. and then you fill in all the roster around it. The team also desperately needed Teoscar Hernandez back because they really didn't have an outfield that you could rely on if he wasn't back. So they did all the things they need to do to not worry about winning 110 or 111 or 117, but go out there and win that day's game and ultimately win 11 in October, because we know that is the only thing they care about, is winning 11 games in October. And I love that we get to sit here and watch this team knowing that that's the mindset, as where you get some teams where, hopefully maybe if things fall right, we could get into a play-in game and get a little bit more revenue.
Maybe 11 wins in August for some teams.
Ouch. I think Artie Moreno would love that. Honestly, maybe not. I don't know. I think he hates baseball, but it's a whole different story.
They got a different thing going on there in the other side of Los Angeles. Clint, you mentioned you believe that they're going to get around 109 wins.
Yeah, that's the number I circled here. And usually I make my predictions on my show, and then you say things on here and then you just forget. So I've been starting to make sure I write it down, and I can look over here and always see it. 109. That's my number this year, which is just insane. It's an insane number to really throw out there with how good the NL West is.
Yeah, I mean, even getting over the century mark, 105 and going above that. Jacob, off the top of your head, I mean, what's your ballpark and what you think the Dodgers record potentially is?
Yeah, I like that. I was going to ask you if Underdog had a line at like 109.5, are you taking the over or the under on it?
I mean, I would probably take, if everything's going well, I would probably take the over. I think I'm trying to figure out which sport book had it, but it was astronomically high, like the highest I've ever seen it. I think their over under in Vegas was like 105 and a half wins.
Wow.
Which I've never seen that before.
Vegas,
their numbers I think they were the overwhelming favorite to win the National League West as well at like minus like 200 or 350. It was crazy, where every other division was kind of like a coin flip except for like the NL East, surprisingly. But yeah, I would say they're probably in that 105 to 110 win territory. If the division's kind of bad, say the Padres regress, Diamondbacks aren't really there, and the September they don't really have to push themselves, they're going to rest starters, they're going to make sure everyone's healthy for October. I mean, I guess they'll want the home field advantage. They're going to want to try to have the best record in the National League, or at least one of the top two records.
Yeah,
and I think that's all manageable, especially with the way the playoff format is. But I expect a big season in Los Angeles. That's pretty much the big point of all of this.
Do you have sources on that one?
Yeah, I mean, expectations high, guys. I don't know if you guys know this, but yeah, the defending World Series champions, they want to repeat and be the first team to do it in over 20 years now. Last team to do it was the New York Yankees. So we'll see if they can do it. Spring training obviously is in full swing right now. Position players will report later this week. Pitchers and catchers already have been at camp for 2 days. Pretty much the entire squad looks like they're there at CamelBack Ranch in Glendale, Arizona. So clearly the vibes are high. We're seeing a lot of videos, a lot of pictures. Roki Sasaki threw today. Ohtani's been throwing on flat grounds. A lot of the hitters are getting their work in. Mookie Betts getting some fielding work at shortstop. It's all great to see. I will give a shout out to our guy, Doomsal Mike. He is in Glendale for the next week. I believe he does have media pass the next day or so. But he was very active on X today, posting images and all that. So be sure to give him a follow him on there. And we've also been reposting it on our social media pages as well. But pivoting here to, spring training. I mean, some of these players we've already mentioned, roster spots are kind of tight right now, Clint. Some of these players need to have something to prove to either to the organization, to themselves, to get a spot on this roster or to be considered for a spot later down the line. Yeah. Looking through this pool of players, is there one particular guy that you think kind of needs to either get back on track or step up this spring over the next month or so?
I mean, if we're looking at somebody who really needs to have a good spring, it's somebody we've already talked about. It's Chris Taylor, and he needs to do that for him. He needs to do that to quiet some of the haters. We know there's plenty, or maybe less haters and more detractors, and rightfully so, because he's been bad. And he was really bad. And, they cherry picked his playing time last year, and he did have a solid second half, stats wise, hitting 303 in the second half. But You look at, he was barely played, so they very much cherry picked when he got in there. But he needs to show up and prove to this team that he needs to prove to himself that he can still do it, and that whatever swing changes he's working on and he was working on at the end of last season, that's the plan. Like, find your swing and stick with it. Don't change in season again, because this is a team that very clearly has other talent that deserves your roster spot. So Taylor, that's somebody you need to be watching.
Jacob, I mean, Taylor obviously is a big one, and we talked about it already in this show where, he kind of has to put it up. Not, I think, for the Dodgers, because even if he does say struggle a little bit, I think he's still guaranteed a spot as long as he's healthy. But I think to win back confidence of the fan base and hell, even himself, and I know he won't tell you that. No athlete will. They'll never get down on themselves. But who do you have circled on the Dodgers roster right now, whether position player or pitcher, that kind of needs to, get a jolt, get a quick start to the season?
Yeah, I think Chris Taylor's absolutely at the top of that list. There's some guys that maybe they don't have to prove something, but it would be really cool to, like a Ben Kasparius, come out and pitch well. I think he was working on a changeup over the offseason. Not sure. I've always said he needs something that goes the other way. So Ben Kasparius is a guy that I'm fascinated to watch. And obviously, Roki Sasaki doesn't need to prove anything, but I really want to see how his splitter plays, not only against major league talent, because we've seen him in the World Baseball Classic, 80 grade splitter, but with the new baseballs and the new routine and all of that, that's the guy. Maybe he doesn't have much to prove necessarily, but that's who I'm going to be dialed into. Every pitch he throws, looking at every StatCast number I can get eyes on, because he's just such a fascinating pitcher. His stuff is explosive. And that's what I'm going to be focused on. I want to see how everything translates.
I think if you're a Dodgers fan and you want to see him start that second game in Japan that counts, I think you're going to want to hope Sasaki gets off to a fast start. Maybe not look super dominating, but at least enough to get into a rhythm where the Dodgers understand his pitch sequencing, how he feels, how he can attack major league hitters. If he gets off to a fast start, I mean, Dave Roberts already kind of alluded to today that he and Yamamoto will pitch in some form or another in Japan. Is Sasaki going to be pitching in a game that counts, or is it going to be one of those exhibition games? That remains to be seen. We'll see what happens. Obviously, we don't really got to get much into that, but we knew those two were going to be pitching in that series. Imanaga for the Cubs is also going to be going there too as well.
Awesome.
The MLB World Tour in Japan with two of the most iconic franchises in baseball, especially in terms of Japanese presence. That's going to be a good one. But my pick for this is in the pitching department, and it's kind of along the lines, because I think if he has a good spring, he's going to get an opportunity to kind of continue to build off that in the early parts of the regular season. That's Bobby Miller. Bobby Miller was the guy that I was extremely high on last season. I thought he was going to take that next step, if you say, to either be in Cy Young conversation or put himself to be in like a top 10, top 15 type starter. We saw what he did in 2023. He had a really good repertoire, came into the league, helped the Dodgers salvage their rotation, was an anchor from, pretty much his call up until the end of the season. Didn't work out in the NLDS. I know, painful memories there in that against the D-backs, but all in all, he had a really good 2023 rookie season. 2024, I don't know what the hell happened. I mean, I kind of have some indication or what he went through. The shoulder injury was number one. That's something that sidelined him. That's something that was actually a lingering injury for the past year, 2 years. It was something that plagued him at the start of the 2023 year, delayed him in spring training. I don't know if that's still going to impact him this season. It seems like he is fully healthy. He's been trying some new things out. I mean, I saw him working with Yamamoto's trainers, throwing around the javelins out there. So, hey, whatever helps. And then in the second half of the season, when it seemed like the shoulder was good enough or fine, it was the knee. And we've done it, Jacob and I, we've done deep dives, analytically driven, looking at the film and like looking at what he looked like in 23 to 24. if you're hurt and you're pitching hurt, it's the Cody Bellinger effect. You're going to change some things in your mechanics. You're going to change some things in your delivery. The leg that was hurting as a right-handed pitcher was his plant leg, and that's going to make your command be awful. And his whip last year was very high, and he was statistically the worst starting pitcher in baseball last year. He got enough innings pitched to reach that milestone. Nothing really translated in the minor leagues as well. I think if this guy can get off to a good start in spring training, I think he'll probably be a lock to get a starting rotation nod, because if you look at the Dodgers rotation right now, especially if they're going to go with that 6-man, you got 2 starters that are coming back from lengthy injuries, and Tony Gonsolin and Dustin May. Sasaki, he's a rookie coming over from Japan. Don't know entirely what we're going to get with him yet. Obviously, like Jacob said, a lot of stuff to like about him so far. Tyler Glasnow, that's the big one. Where do they start his season out in the IL? Like, how does his elbow feel after, getting a couple innings in spring training under his belt? I know Jacob and I have talked about it. Elbow tendonitis doesn't go away, Clint. That stuff's a lingering thing that can always come back, especially we know his injury history. Blake Snell, if he's not giving you 180 innings, apparently he's not a good pitcher. So that's kind of going to be the mark he wants to get to. And Yamamoto himself even had some shoulder issues last season. So clearly health is a big thing with the Dodgers rotation right now. If Bobby Miller can be that extra bridge until the second half of the season, I think that helps himself out. It helps the Dodgers out, and it'll make them have more tough decisions. Because if you're saying Bobby Miller has a really good spring, a really good first half, how do you say, hey, you're going back to the minor leagues? They would have to make some sort of decisions there. But I think Bobby Miller on the pitching side is definitely an easy one. Chris Taylor is definitely the one on the position player side. But yeah, any comments on that before we move on?
I'd say I would add that Bobby Miller being kind of back to what we saw in 2023 would sort of feed generations for this team. Like you said, there are going to be some innings issues, concerns for this team. We know Ohtani's not going to be available to pitch, probably for the first month of the season. Yamamoto missed time, like you said. Glasnow missed the end of the regular season and the postseason with injury, and is now changing his mechanics. If you can have Bobby Miller be somebody who can slot in 5 or 6 and kind of ride that AAA express, or maybe be one of these dudes that fills in a bullpen role and just kind of sticks to 2 or 3 pitches and lets it eat and is nasty. Bobby, that would be clutch. And I would be kind of curious too to expand. Jacob, I want to hear your thoughts first on Bobby, but is it Bobby Miller or is it Dustin May? Who are you more like hopeful for? That's just like a general question to throw out there, but anyways, go for it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm willing to say no one watched more film on Bobby Miller in 2024 on X than I did. I watched so much Bobby Miller, which is why I'm very confident that he's going to come back and be a lot more like his 2023 self. We mentioned the knee injury. It completely changed the way he pitched. He started falling off towards first base a little bit. These are things the Dodgers caught as the season went on, because then he started over adjusting and then he wasn't falling off towards first base enough. It was throughout the year. When you go back and watch, you could see they were constantly trying to make adjustments with it, and he was never able to get comfortable. I think with health and a full off season of mechanical adjustments, he's going to be a lot more like he was in 2023, which is why I think I would be more confident in him than Dustin May. There's just so much uncertainty with Dustin May. His stuff is disgusting. We all know this. When he's out there, he is like must-see TV with two seamers coming in on you and then sweeper slider curve going the other way. He's disgusting. But there's just so much there's less unknown with Bobby Miller than there is with Dustin May right now, I feel like. But that's not to say Dustin May is not going to come out and just be gross. But, couple arm injuries, it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah.
So
you need him to be gross though for like 5, 6, 7 months, not just 9 starts. And all right, boys, I'm done. I got mine in.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing with with May has always been his health. And Miller, to an extent, while he's battled injuries, they've never been so significant where he's like, all right, I got to shut it down. I'm going to be gone. I got to go under the knife. I got to rehab. We haven't seen that from Bobby Miller. We haven't seen it through college or in his major league career. So I think that's, like Jacob's doing, knock on wood here. I don't hope nothing comes of that. You look at the advanced metrics on Miller's pitches, he didn't have a single pitch that was under league average. Everything was above average or close to elite. It's just either location was bad, pitch sequency was not good. He was leaving a lot of changeups down the heart of the plate. Yeah. Sliders weren't breaking off. His home run rate went up. He's got the gas. He can blow it by you. I just think he needs to grow. And that's something that a lot of people have said around the organization, whether they cover the team, through TV, the clubhouse, all that stuff. They've said that, personality wise, being pitching on the mound, sometimes you got to get rid of that fuck you fastball mentality and be a pitcher. And I think that's where Blake Snell comes into all of this, where he said he really wants to take him under his wing. Blake Snell's the perfect archetype for Bobby Miller. All right, if you're not going to, I don't want to give up home runs, either walk them or just strike him out another way. Like, move it along here, put in a better pitch sequence here. But in terms of who I would probably bet on, I would probably say Miller's the safer bet because Dustin May's a wild card at this point. I mean, He is nasty. I remember starting out the 2023 season, he took, 7 innings, shutout against the D-backs to kick off the year and during the home opener. And then it was pretty much, he's never really had the strikeout numbers for what his pitches do and the speed he has, but he's just been nasty. Chris Sale-esque, but a righty, with the flowing, red curly hair. I mean, obviously if you see the pictures now, the beard's working, the hair's still there. He's a guy that can be dominant. It just depends on what do you even think the Dodgers' role for him is. I know a lot of people will say bullpen, but there's really not a proven success story to say a guy that's battled injuries is better in the bullpen compared to the starting rotation. I would even go as far to say it's probably the opposite, because then you're asking him to ramp up his arm and his body, in a situation where he's not guaranteed to pitch on short notice compared to being in the rotation where he's guaranteed to know some type of, pattern with him going into a game every 5th or 6th day. So I think that's going to be another storyline to watch, is how does Dustin May look this spring training?
And I would say for D May, he's not just pitching for the Dodgers. And we talked about this on my channel. He's pitching for 29 other teams. That's a big thing he's doing right now, and the bag for sure, because he's got to look at that somewhere down the road. And we know people will pay if you're that nasty, but got to stay healthy, got to stay on that bump for the entirety of the season.
Yeah, I mean, 1 year, he is a free agent next year, so maybe he has something to prove for himself and to get a little bit of that extra money here to be a guaranteed starter, whether it's returning to the Dodgers or going elsewhere. A couple other news that we got today. It kind of feels like old news because I remember Bob Nightingale mentioned it as well. 2 relief pitchers in the Dodgers. Evan Phillips, we got the news from Bill Plunkett yesterday, strained rotator cuff or a slight tear in his rotator cuff last October, got the injection to help with that. Still is slightly behind schedule, possibly could open up the opening day on the injured list. And then Michael Kopech is also behind in his throwing program. I believe Nightingale said it was shoulder inflammation, so we'll see what goes with that. Clint, looking at those 2 relievers, big key contributors to the Dodgers bullpen that is going to be at minimum top 5 in the league, especially with the arms they got. Are you worried? Are you frustrated that the Dodgers are already starting to be less transparent with their injuries? Because I know they've been asked about it before, especially with Kopech when Brandon Gomes was asked a while ago about it. But are you worried, or what are your overall feelings of these injuries starting already? I mean, like I tweeted out, you can never have enough starting pitching. Am I right?
That's what I hear. No, with the Kopech thing, I think it's kind of funny that Gomer did come out and basically, combat Bob Nightingale's report, and then we come here and they're both behind schedule. I'll just say it doesn't seem to be for either pitcher, doesn't seem to be anything like super major, anything that's going to keep them out for the entirety of the season. So it's better to have it done now. I'm definitely more worried about Evan Phillips when you're talking about, I don't remember if it was a rotator cuff or labrum. I forget what it is. You had said rotator cuff. But either way with that, it's still something like, it feels like if the PRP doesn't hold for him, all of a sudden you're down in Evan Phillips. And now that Kirby Yates deal just makes a whole lot more sense. And now you understand why they went out and got a Tanner Scott, because they might lose one of their key back end of the bullpen arms. So I crossing my fingers. I'm really hopeful that these aren't major injuries, but it's a tough blow. And to open the season with more pitching injuries, it's like, come on, we just went through that. All the injuries can stay in 2024, man.
Jacob, I mean, obviously you saw the reports out there. We talked about, Kopech a couple weeks back. Evan Phillips, I mean, I talked about that during the World Series, losing him, not having him in the bullpen was big for just a short 5-game series that was. If you're talking about a whole 162 game season plus postseason, if he's possibly out an extended period of time, that's also a big concern there as well. But the Dodgers did enough to kind of calm your worries, did they not?
Yeah, well, I want to go back. We recorded right before New Year's an episode, and we talked about Dodgers' New Year's resolution, and I chose pitching injuries. So this is bad news, but it's hard to be worried because of those guys they got, and they have depth. They have guys at AAA who can give them innings. They've got Henriquez, who really doesn't have a spot next year, but still got some outs for them last year. So as far as like team success, I'm not concerned. With Kopech, the original report, I believe, was elbow inflammation, which you never like to hear that, but I'm not too worried about it. The Dodgers will be okay. They've got plenty of depth, even if heaven forbid something does happen and those guys get a worse injury. There's plenty of guys there. This team is loaded with talent. They will be okay.
And what I like is it opens a door for somebody like Benny Caps, because you were talking about Kasperius earlier, and
I love that dude.
Like, he was one of those dudes who wasn't on my radar entering last spring training, but eventually when he made his MLB debut, I'm like, oh damn, this dude is fucking nasty. He was filthy. So to have him just kind of chilling at AAA, hey, I'm here when you need me, boys. I feel really confident, like you, man. I feel confident about the depth of this team, and that's why they were so active this offseason, getting top end talent, and just to kind of buy more time for their own homegrown talent.
Yep. I'll kind of piggyback off this. I wonder how much it is like they're truthfully like actually like detrimentally injured, because obviously the term roster manipulation gets thrown out there a lot, and the Dodgers have been a team that have done phantom IL stints, or something that can be perceived as that. The Mets have been famous for getting in trouble for it, but the Dodgers, pretty much every organization in baseball takes advantage of it. I think the Dodgers are in a unique situation where even when they break for Japan, it's similar to last season, where they, instead of crunching down the roster to 26, it's 31. I think Fabian Ardaya even confirmed that today, is that they will still have an expanded active roster in Japan. Doesn't mean that they have to make an IL move just yet. Evan Phillips, Kopech, they can still throw, be with the team, travel with the team over there. But say come domestic opening day, against the Tigers at Dodger Stadium, that's when you can see the Dodgers say, all right, we liked what we saw from a Bobby Miller. We like what we saw from a Kasperius. Let's give them a shot. Let's have them start the season, keep our bullpen fresh. And then once those guys are ready, whether it's May or June or later, the Dodgers have the ability to do that. And I think that's, smart, because you look at the pitching depth that they have. A lot of people said, all right, you got to trade some of these guys. You got to get something else for them. And I think all of us were kind of unanimous on here, from what I've heard, is that where it's like, they need to hold on to these guys, because we don't know what's going to happen as the season goes on. And I think that's what the Dodgers are preparing for pretty much right now. We're probably going to see some more people be slow played. I kind of already alluded to what's Glasnow's situation going to be, or do they want him to start games in March, April, and May, or do they want him to start games in October? The Dodgers are going to have to start making those tough decisions, but I think they do a good job in communication with the player and then what their goals are. And the players kind of just fall in line with that.
Yeah, and when we did see that kind of weird communication, at least with the Glasnow on the Glasnow front in like August of last year, where he sort of challenged what the team wanted him to do. Hopefully, everybody's falling in line when it comes to that regard. But yeah, there's thankfully for this team there is enough talent, there is enough depth. You got some dudes coming back as well this year: Emmett Sheehan, Nick Frasso, who can help out. Justin Wrobleski still being around, whether that's in the bullpen or in relief or as a starter. Like, they will survive 162, and it's most important to get the big dogs ready to go in August and September. One of those guys will be Clayton Kershaw too, which that's a whole other conversation. How does that look when you get into August? That rotation is going to be talk about tough conversations there for Dave.
Yeah, completely agree.
You brought up Kershaw, and I think we can end on that right now. Clearly, it was the worst kept secret. There was a lot of transparency.
Yeah.
I love him just showing up on day one. That's clutch.
I think that was funny where, I think it was Dylan Hernandez who posted the video first and kind of was just like, yeah, Kershaw's here throwing around. Not officially signed yet. It's going to happen. There was a lot of reports saying that it was going to be officially announced today. And it looks like, as far as we're recording this right now, that doesn't seem to be the case. But clearly the Dodgers are going to make the move. They're going to bring him back. I'm curious to see what type of deal it is. I'm probably 98% sure it's another 1-year deal. But could he try to get, a 2-year deal, take him to the end of his career with that extra 1 year, guaranteed for him? I mean, he opted out of the 1-year player option for $10 million. So usually when a player does that, they're kind of trying to get a multi-year offer. Don't know if Kershaw is obliged to that, but overall thoughts quickly here, Clint. Kershaw coming back. I mean, he was never going anywhere, was he?
No, he's never going anywhere. I love having him back. Year 18 makes me feel incredibly old because I've seen the entirety of this dude's career, from spring training game 1 to now. But the Dodgers without Clayton Kershaw, it doesn't sound right. Does not feel right to me. So I implore everybody, even the people that don't want Clayton on this team anymore, just soak it up. You're watching a legend. You're watching a Hall of Famer that, as long as his foot and knee and shoulder aren't barking, he's going to put up really good numbers. Yeah, it's not with the same flash that you saw a decade ago, but this is still one of the best to ever do it, and you got to enjoy it while you still can.
I mean, if you look at 2023, 2.46 ERA, and he was, for the most part, healthy that season until the second half. We obviously saw what he went through with the postseason with the shoulder, got surgery, had 2 surgeries again this year as well, one on the knee, and I believe the other one was on the toe. We'll see what he looks like when he comes back. But Jacob, obviously, we know the deal was going to happen. Now we're just waiting for, the figures and for it to officially be announced from the team and who the 60-day IL move is going to be. But overall thoughts, like Clint, Kershaw back for year 18.
Yeah, expected, but awesome. For some context, Kershaw's been a Dodger for somewhere between 80% to 90% of my life. So not to make you guys feel old here, but I grew up watching Kershaw. It's awesome. I'm just, whatever he can give us, I'm more than open to, and happy that hopefully we'll be able to see him hit 3K next year.
Yeah, that's going to be fun.
That's the big one. And hopefully, I mean, the strikeout numbers, I believe he's only 32 away from that. So obviously, depending on timetable of him coming back, it can be manageable. Give him, 6, maybe 7, 8 starts if he's fully healthy in the second half with the 6-man rotation. I just love him being along for the ride. Hell, if he's not even on the October roster, give him a 3rd ring, have him stat pad that Hall of Fame resume, get him 3 World Series rings. That way, when I'm looking back in time, we're like, well, Mad Bum had 3, but he didn't have the career that, Kershaw had in the regular season. I thought we were comparing rings here, Giants fans. But, yeah, I mean, he's going to be competitive. We know what we're going to get with him. He wouldn't want to come back if he felt like he couldn't do it. And he even alluded to that in his conversations he's had in his brief public appearances, where he still feels the love for the game. He still feels like he can give the team something. And that's saying something with all the guys that they have on this roster right now. And Kershaw's at the point in his career where it's not as much with the player side of things. It's the Dodgers themselves, the culture preaching that he's been a Dodger for life. And that helps for newer guys that are coming onto the team and people that are joining the organization and kind of pushing the Dodger way or the Clayton Kershaw way. So a lot of things are more than deals are just more than the numbers. You can name it with a lot of guys we talked about today. It's more than the numbers with Kike. It's more than numbers with Taylor. It's definitely more than the numbers with Kershaw. So I think it's glad that to have him back for another year because I don't think he'll ever wear another hat.
Absolutely not.
I just want to add, hopefully by the time he's eligible for the Hall of Fame, that one person that didn't vote for Ichiro has moved on to another job and is not voting anymore. Because
I'll tell you this, I would say there's probably never going to be a unanimous Hall of Fame vote. I mean, that could be a conversation for another day, but I feel like there's always going to be one writer that's going to be like, I'm gonna go against the grain.
Make it all public,
and they'll never make it public.
Yeah, you know what? You can't vote against. You can't be somebody who doesn't put him on your Hall of Fame list on your card if he wins the world. If this Dodgers team wins World Series again this year, it's a bona fide fact right there. 3-time World Series champion, 3-time Cy Young Award winner, 10-time All-Star, and all that, MVP 2014. Like, how do you say no? He's not a first ballot Hall of Famer. So that I would like to see, like Ichiro. I'd like to have lunch with that fella who would vote no.
Chat. Yeah,
just a conversation.
But yeah, it's a good time in Dodgerland right now, and the 2025 season is finally here after much anticipation. After the offseason the Dodgers had, the defending 2024 World Series champions are going to look to, claim their title back again and keep that, into 2025. Clint, before we end it here, obviously, I mentioned it earlier, popular on all your Dodgers social media platforms, but where can people find you? What do you have coming up on, Dodgers territory? What do you got coming up on your personal one? All Dodgers. What's going on with you?
Well, find me on all the social medias at RealFRG. It's pretty simple. And for people who ask, it stands for Fat Ryan Gosling. It's an old character I used to be on our original version of a podcast I did years ago. Tomorrow, the new Dodger front office man, Farhan Zaidi, coming back. He joins Alana and I tomorrow. So I'm definitely going to ask him about that Kershaw contract if I can. He'll be joining us at 12 o'clock Pacific time on Dodgers territory. And then myself and my buddy producer Kevin should be live tomorrow evening, wrapping up the latest, talking about what's going on at CamelBack Ranch, because there's always something fun and exciting going on at this time of year. So guys, give us a follow. I'd appreciate it. That's All Dodgers with Clint Pasillas. Super easy to find because that's my name. You see it on the screen. Just Google me.
Yeah, obviously, if a Dodgers fan or someone that follows baseball doesn't know your name by now in the podcast, especially you working with Foul Territory by now, they got to open their horizons and start listening to your stuff. I've listened to you for a long time, so
appreciate you, gentlemen.
We love having a collaboration with you. We're definitely going to try to do this more throughout the season because there's a lot of stuff to talk about in Dodgerland. So thanks again for coming on. And this episode was brought to you by Bet Online. And thanks to everyone in the chat. We'll see you next time.
Bye.